Wherever you are in this wonderful, crazy, mad, lunacy world, we hope you're having a great day. And welcome to another episode in the Soft and System Side to Sales, where we look at all the different elements of the sales mechanism, the team, the leadership, the account managers, all the different elements, both soft and process, to ensure they're all aligned together. And today we're focusing on the role of the sales leader, and it's not just about leading sales. Hello, everyone, and welcome, Jason, my good friend, where we do this every week. And our special guest, Pat and Yorum, from different parts of the world, across the waters in New York and Canada. Welcome, everybody. And today we're talking about the role of the sales leadership. And the first question I want to ask people to open it up: what do you believe the role of the sales leadership and the sales team in the bigger schemes of things with their business and their customers?
Oh, that's a big question. That's a multifaceted question. So let's quick snapshot. You're a therapist in jest. You're a coach. You're a strategist. You're an enabler. You're a listener. You're an inclusionist. You're psychological safety. There's so much more in that. Let's throw the question out to Yorum and Patrick as well.
I didn't get the question. Could you repeat it?
Yeah, we were talking about the role of the sales leader, and it goes beyond sales. So I was opening it up. What do you believe initially about what the role of the sales leader is in the business?
After Patrick.
Well, so you know where I want to go with this? Creativity. And I'm not hearing enough people talking about it. To me, this is really critical because creativity really brings about direction, vision. It also brings about how the team embraces the culture in order to bring something new to the market, because our customers are dying for new things. Otherwise, what we end up selling is stuff. And I can remember being in a meeting here in Canada many years ago, and we took the wrong thing into the customer. And long story short was, he said, it was around February, this time of the year, he says, "Look out the window. What do you see out there?" So, "Oh, lots of ice, man, lots of snow." He says, "Now you get it. What you just brought me in this proposal was ice in the winter. I can go out and pick my own."
Yeah. So what you're talking about, Patrick, it's solving, really understanding your customers' needs and wants, and being creative of how you deliver and package a service or product in that regard.
I think you've got to be evolving all the time. I mean, here we are doing a podcast to try to bring exceptional value to your followers, and it's an honor to be with you. Here's the thing: if we talked about the same thing every week, we'd be tuned out in about 2 seconds. And the other thing is that we've all got to continue to be creators. You see, what I put up a video this week, and I just said to everybody, I said, stop being critical. If you see something that is in need of being fixed, fix it. Don't stand there and point at it. Fix it.
Like that, yeah. You're absolutely right, because there's so many moaners out there. But and I know we've spoken about this before, and I've spoken about this millions of times, that self-accountability. As a leader, you obviously have a boss up there, or unless you're the CEO of the business or whatever, and you're running it that way. But you've got to encourage this self-accountability for every single person within your team to actually just start to think on your feet. If something needs to be done, you just go off and do it. give them the autonomy to actually go off and do it. Give them the freedom to actually, I'm not going to be here to micromanage you. You're here to run your business. And I know we've spoken about this before. It's also about getting them to actually own their business and to be autonomous, and for them to actually share what they're going to be doing in your one-to-one discussions. So you know exactly where they're going, because they're giving you their business plan, what you're doing, giving them help to actually create that. And then once they know what they're going to be doing, you can actually go, thank you. Now I can actually coach you to help you achieve that, as one of the coaching things that I do as a sales leader. But there's so many other facets around that. And it's also keeping that analytical brain amongst us, so we can actually crunch numbers in our heads. But also analytical thinking is, as Patrick always said, it's to think strategically about the business needs, the bigger picture, and then have a look at the micro picture as well. What are the team doing individually, and work out where they need to be going as well, whether it's their growth, whether it's their learning, whether it's something else. So you really have to understand lots of different things: behavior, body language, language patterns, how they're thinking and feeling. Because you want to make sure that it's that psychological safe environment that sometimes things don't go to plan, and you want them to be resilient. And we're all smiling because we've all had it over the last few weeks, months, and we're all leaders in our
Sorry,
own.
sometimes things do actually go to plan.
Sometimes.
Okay, let me know when that happens. Can I interject? Because I don't actually necessarily know if it's creativity. I hear what Patrick is saying, because I'm not the most. I always pitch myself. I'm not an ideas person. I'm a make things happen person, or get the best out of something. And I think there needs to be different skill sets. I think the thing about sales manager, it really depends who. When you say what's a sales manager supposed to do, you're dealing with the people you manage. You're dealing with your own career. You're dealing with other teams. You're dealing with the people above you who are saying, we need some money, we need to finance this. You're also dealing with various people across the company, or you should be. I think the problem is for sales leaders is they may just look up and down but not across. That happens too often as well. But I think it's really understanding and I think you've somehow got to manage expectations and get the best out of people. So I think sometimes the C-suite will push you, and that's their job because they're managing you. But sometimes you also got to be realistic about what can be achievable in that time frame, right? In other words, what they want to do is going to be a push. I've got some ideas about how we can make this happen, but it's not going to happen maybe the timeline they wanted, but it will. And if we try and push it, it just looks like impossible. I think at the same time, it's really understanding about, and a lot of this is actually like sales when you think about this, is you've got to be there for various people. I think one of the biggest mistakes sales managers make, and this differentiates, I think, a true leader between somebody who's a manager. Sales managers may sometimes assume, I want this, I want that, so does everybody else. It doesn't work like that. I've worked with people who are management material. They have no interest. They want their money, and you will not get them, and they can do it, and they have no interest in doing it whatsoever. And they're brilliant. They're absolutely brilliant. And they're great with people. They can be firm, they can be kind, which is some things you have to do and go into that in more detail. So it's really understanding what's getting that person excited, interested. Some people, yeah, everybody wants the money, but they're more interested about the being recognized. Others like, don't recognize it, just help my good work and success pay off. And there's many, many different things in between. And I think sometimes you've got to bring people down to reality of your team as well. They expect to get that promotion. They think they're the next whatever. They're not. They might get there, but if you can help them get on that road, great things can be achieved. So I think it's really understanding where people are coming from, what you've got to achieve, and trying to find a way to make that happen. And maybe managing expectations along the way, I think, is number one. I think another thing is, for example, I think I spoke to this on other things. I can think of a personal experience where one manager who worked with marketing, which was not easy. But and that may be them as us, But we thought that whole division. This is when I was not in a startup, in a big company. We usually said he comes in, he's usually got to pull marketing and sales apart off each other before they gouge each other's eyes out. This time they were bursting his office saying, "It's a great idea, Phil." But I think that's very important, is really understanding, well, you want the tech to be like this or whatever. Understand what the analyst's up against, understand what marketing up against, what they're being pushed about. You want it to be brilliant, your sales team. Well, why isn't this being fixed? Because, understand where the IT team, the developers are coming from. And the same it might be with suppliers, it might be with customer service. When you work together, listen, there are people out there who may not be that great, but you also can understand where they're coming from. And that's what a really good manager can do. And then channel it ultimately and develop really great salespeople. And, my dream one day is to be in a company where everybody recognizes, if I develop a great salesperson who's even better than me, I've done my job really well. This is the biggest compliment you can give me.
You see, that's what you just said there at the very end, to me, is like the big picture. Funny little story for you. So I had my coordinator come in, who was just an extremely bright young man. I mean, he was just so smart. And he served the retail team really well. And we were the second largest team in the company. I think we were responsible for, 150 million annually, which is, not a big chunk of change, but it's nice. And he comes in and he sits down beside me. He says, "You know what, Pat?" He says, I'm going to move on. I'm going to move on to the magazine division. Our company was just going through a buyout. We got bought a couple of times. I was applying for the same job. I just needed to get away from all the craziness, right? And I said, "Geez, Jack," I said, "I'm applying for the same job." And his head dropped and he says, "I can't beat you." I said, "No, that's not the way we're going to think about this. The final decision won't be made for about 6 weeks. I have 6 weeks to get you equal or better than me." He said, "Why would you do that?" I said, "Because you serve the team selflessly." And I said, "It's my job to serve you selflessly so that you will be much better than I ever hoped to be." And I did get the job. He didn't. But I'll tell you what, he landed a publisher's job within about 2 years. That's how good he was after that interview. So what you just said about developing your people, I think is critical, because if you don't, what ends up happening is that you get desperate as a manager, and you smell. And believe me, when a fish dies, it dies from the head down to the tail, not the other way.
Yeah, I think that's very powerful, Patrick. And like one of the quotes I've heard this a long time ago is, "The role of a leader is to create future leaders," right? And that's always stuck with me. And it applies even more so to sales, because like I'm gonna take everything you said and I'm gonna raise the bar a little bit. And I'm gonna look for your thoughts on this idea, because I believe the sales team are the most important team in business, right? For a number of different reasons, or could be, right? Could be. And I'll tell you why. They're integrators, right? It's not only do they have the hardest job in the company to get sales and keep the business thriving, no matter what the economic scenario is, it is difficult. People just see the shiny bit on the outside. Oh, yeah, that person's really good, but they don't understand the work and the effort that goes into the back end to create the situation they're in today. But I want to raise the bar with this concept. I believe the sales leaders within the business can play a bigger role in the business, and should do, right? They are integrators. They integrate, they touch every point in that business, every team in that business, right? Whether it's marketing, product development, development, delivery, service delivery, back end operations, purchasing, doing accruals, doing forecasts, everything. They touch every part of the business, right? So I believe if a sales leader has a bigger picture in mind, they should step up and be that person where they support every element in the business and bring their team on that journey. So everything is onboarded and seamless when it comes to sales development, product service development, and delivery. So I'd love your thoughts on that.
I was just going to, my thoughts from seeing it in a corporate setting with thousands of salespeople. I've seen the pressure that they've been under, and the time is just so precious, meaning they're back to back with meetings all day. They don't have a time to think. So I think that their time management needs to be done really well. And rather than having all these back to back, because I've seen it, and every single one of them were doing it. And I trained over 500 of them a couple of years ago. And I was going, what are you doing, guys? Have that mental break between each meeting so you can recoup, take some notes, think strategically what's happening next, because you just cannot do it. So that's what happens with burnout. And the bigger the organizations, the more stress, the anxiety actually builds in, because we don't want those managers that are completely stressed out because they can't think strategically, they can't coach, they can't do other things. Because practicality, they need to be working with their teams, they need to be strategizing, they need to have that air of adaptability and awareness around them. But when you're under pressure, all of this just flops out your head, because then you're just stressed and you cannot deal with the day-to-day. So I think it's time management, but it's also your mental agility to actually take a step back as a sales leader and think a little bit better. But I've just seen it. They're just so often just stressed out completely. And
when I was a kid, there was a film called The Matrix. I don't know if anybody remembers it.
I think we do, yes.
Yeah, I think we do.
No, I don't know. If you're under 30, you probably don't. But when did early 2000, whenever. It's probably been longer. There was a bit at the end of the film where he's being attacked, and he can suddenly at the end of the film master it, where he's just like waving a hand, and he can just handle the attack. That's what you've got to get yourself into. And we joked before about nothing goes to plan.
That is
Unless
true.
you have a plan, you can't handle nothing going to plan. It's fine if nothing goes to plan. It's called life. But you've got to have a plan and be able to adapt. Otherwise, you're forever scrambling. I think, Jason, what you mentioned is important. But most salespeople are not the big managers, are not the big interconnectors. They've got to make themselves that person.
Yeah.
They've got to encourage a team. And I think I have seen this myself, where I have worked with managers who are fantastic but aren't around enough. And they're not making those connections, and it's harder for us to get things done. Other managers might be around, great, but we actually need you here to help us. So I think it's also, listen, you've got to have a company that allows this to happen too, and a culture, and that comes from the very top. That's a whole other conversation. I would like to say one thing as well, and Patrick, sorry, I did defer to you. No. I think as sales manager, even if the culture is not where this ideal, it's up to sales manager to make things happen. I gave the example of the marketing. That was driven by my sales team. It was my sales manager, sorry. She was one manager. Really, we should all be doing this. She decided she is going to make this happen. And we said, oh, do we have to do it every week? She says, listen, they want to do it every week. We do it every week, right? Like, we've got to give them that. And there was still more we could do, right? And it was actually really fantastic because we could give them feedback. It helped us understand a bit about where they were coming from. We could give them feedback about what's working, what's not. And they could go to their management and help them and say, you know, you're saying do this, but the salespeople tried this 5 times. It's not working. This you're not excited about. Look at, we didn't get as many leads, but we got a much better return, right? A far higher percentage of those are now our brand new clients and customers. And I think that's another thing. And it's, you know, also understand where you can help them out. You know, if I could basically get, I remember once I was in a month where I had to hit, it was 2 o'clock. I've got this gap between my target. So's the marketing gap. And I pushed and pushed that. That's a whole other story. But the reality is I focused on areas that would help me and help them. We both hit our target by this about 12 minutes to spare. But I think that is what a sales manager needs to do. They need to step up and make it happen themselves. They can't just blame it on the culture. Yes, they can vent sometimes, understandable. You need to make this happen. And you know what the acid test was? When this manager went on maternity leave, that whole relationship fell apart. It was sad, but it showed really it was her who made it happen. Patrick, I'm sorry, man. All you.
No, you're hitting on so many notes here. I'm just reading Mike Weinberg's book. I've just finished it, by the way. Give it a great review. There was one lady that stood up, and she enabled her team so much that she created 2 President's Club members on her back. And then once she cut them loose, they fell apart and she actually had to fire them. So let's be honest and say that there are as many different management styles as there are sales styles. We're people. There is a negotiation book, I won't name it, but the guy whose stories it's based on says there are only 3 negotiation styles. That is cow-pucky, as we say in Western Canada. What we know about personality styles, at least I know in the corporate world, there's at least 6 to 8 that are dominant.
At least.
And if you've read any of Marcus Buckingham's work, he goes up to around 28 or something like that. But here's the salient point. Not all salespeople want to be sales managers. You're staring at one. I got forced into it. I did not want it. I was running my own team when I was 16 years old, delivering pianos for a company, and I was working 40 hours a week. And I can tell you, it just wore me out because I had to put my life on hold until I got everybody else's work finished. And then I was able to actually do my schoolwork starting at 10 o'clock at night in high school. So when I got to the corporate world, I know it sounds funny when you kind of hear it that way, but here's the funny thing is that when I got into corporate, the reason that I went there was I wanted to create impact. And when you create impact, the whole ecosystem wants to talk to you, because what I would do is I would jump on planes and I would go up to Calgary and I would say, all right, walk me in and show me your equipment and show me the things that we should be doing that we don't understand because you can't explain it in production to salespeople. Because I said, I'm a gearhead and I will sit here and I'll listen to you. And I would do the same thing with distribution. I would do the same thing with editorial. Believe it or not, I would book an hour meeting every week with a credit department.
I think there is, maybe you need each sales manager to be effective and be a really great sales manager, needs several styles of sales management for the same team often. And if you only need the same one, sorry?
I was going to say, again, it's knowing who your team members are. So you're going to be speaking with people in a different way, depending on their communication styles. If they're outgoing or if they're introverts. So they're all slightly different on how you actually can speak with them and then approach them to find out what works for them. So you have to be adaptable within that and just knowing how to push and pull people into the right directions.
Absolutely. And I think that's, I was about to also add to that. If one sales style is enough for all your team, you might not have the most versatile and best team you could. I think the problem is sometimes sales managers, I think this should be the next thing, is it's not just hitting a certain point, but great, we've done it. How do we get better? Because I've met people, and I remember once doing one of these and I was very curious. I'll give you a example. Was being, during the pandemic, and I think we had to work remotely. And one of the things that got me, and I'm not one of these like we must be in the office, we must be remote. I believe in depends on the situation, etc. But somebody said, yeah, they've got a great remote team. It's working very well. So I said, the one thing I'm really curious is there's a certain osmosis you get when salespeople are together. You pick up things. How have you replicated it? And it just gave me a very, very banal answer, which basically said, no, we've got this. Well, I think, we've got a good team, I think. And I'm thinking you don't even have the most basic listening skills. How's your team that good? Maybe for you, it is good. Maybe you're hitting your numbers. But just because you set a target of, say, 100 doesn't mean you shouldn't hit 250.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing. If you make your sales team the best and they feel empowered, and I think that is something as well. I mean, there's a whole other thing we can talk about is actually hiring, how important building the team is and managing those you've got. But I think I'm going to many, many different directions at once.
Can I ask? So I want to ask Shay and Jason, if you couldn't operate in an office, and what Yorum is saying is absolutely true, by the way, how would you do it? How would you bring your team together in a public setting that is so unorthodox that everybody would just sit there and freak out? What would you do? And by the way, it has to be efficacious and productive.
Well, that's a really good question, Patrick. And I have worked with sales teams remotely, right? And just before I answer that question, just segueing back to what Yorum said, right? And again, going back to the role of sales in a business, it's the hardest because they're also the hardest team in the beginning to get to gel. Because stereotypically, salespeople are very independent, right? They like working on their own. They like having their own autonomy, right? So what you said, Yorum, about building the team is crucial, right? It's absolutely paramount. And what I do, Patrick, right? It's because I'm an engineer, to answer your question, what I do, I totally freak them out and I start putting post-its on a wall and building a process, right? And that really freaks them out because they're all going, well, I'm not going to tell everybody my process because my process I want to keep to myself. And I work really hard with them to get that gelling. And then I prove to them, well, if you share the information together, it's going to complement everyone. Because if you all share what works for you when you're talking to your clients, you'll all gain. And once you prove that with them, sorry, go on.
I know for sure.
Yeah. And once you prove that once, and I want to give you a quick example. I did work with a company down the west of Ireland, and I had this issue building them together. And we actually built out a current state of the process, right? And I brought in other people. I always bring, and the other thing, Patrick, I do is bring other people that are not related to sales involved because they'll always ask questions the salespeople won't because they don't know. And they say the silliest stuff, but it turns out to be really smart. Yeah. And one of the in this particular incident, the quality manager, they sold pharmaceutical ingredients to the pharmaceutical industry. And the quality manager said brashly, every time I'm involved in a sale, we get the sale, right? As if to put one up on all the salespeople. And when we look back, he was right. So what we did is we added a new process or step into the process where the goal of the sales rep wasn't to get a sale, was to get the two quality managers to meet, right? And then once that started working, it was a warmer introduction to the sale, the next step, right? Because once the quality managers had a really good conversation, it made the sale easier. So guess what the salespeople do? I didn't have to do anything. They were teaching the quality manager how to engage with people outside the company, teaching them communication, rapport, everything. They became best buddies. And it was a great example of just thinking outside the box that got the team to gel together.
Yeah, I think that's always a good idea. Something that I always try and do is get the buy-in and just do initially get some really great icebreakers to do something slightly different. Meaning I would get one of the team members to make up an icebreaker that goes around like a positive virus within the group. So everyone's laughing and joking and making everything easier because everyone's different. But if you can make a bit of humor within there and a nice icebreaker, and something that I always do as well is go into pairs and find out a couple of things that are similar to each other. So there's that rapport straight away, whatever that might look and feel like. And then also things that they're passionate about within the industry that they're working about. So there's they're all trying to gel together. That's something that I always do initially within any sort of team meeting. And then if there's independent team meetings I've been involved with, is I pick a person every week to say, I need you to spend 5 minutes and this is what you're going to do. I want you to think of an icebreaker. I want you to think of something interesting to bring to the table that just softens the blow to everything, just makes things nice and calm. And I think that's always a good, and I love what you've done, Shay, as well, because I've used that, because I think that's a really good way of having differences within meetings as well.
Do you want to hear one of the funniest openers for a meeting? So it had been arranged between the manager and sort of the senior sales guy. And what they did was they took banknotes and they taped them to the bottom of the chairs in the room. And there's 30 of us in the room, right? And the guy at the front's going, man, we got to hit our numbers. We got to work this hard. I know we can do it if we get together. You just get off your ass and make money. and we got to go. And if only one of you would stand up and just get off your ass, you'd make money. And the one guy explodes into the air and rips his chair apart and pulls out a $20 bill and goes, I just got off my ass and I made money, and the whole room exploded.
I think I saw one of the most useful things I saw was when, I think they did this too often in this particular organization, but I think it has value, is they would get everybody in person to, at the beginning of the meeting, to take a turn to present an idea about selling, whether it be bridging, closing, something. You decide, you've got 5 minutes. So firstly, it made it interesting because everybody else was speaking. Secondly, there's something we had to do because it helped us think about what we're doing, but also, and of course, when you think, I heard it said, when you want to teach something, that's how you really know it. So, when you really have to pass it along, that's what really helps you internalize it. So it helps your presentation skills, and also makes the meeting a bit more interesting. It's not just the same people talking. And I think don't be afraid to rip things up, and don't be concerned about perfection. I remember my first big sales job, 2 things happened. One, I got, I had this bright idea as a new sort of associate salesperson, and it was impossible to basically get calls. And I was basically becoming the top opportunity generator, but obviously I want more, right? We all want to get even better. And so I had this idea of calling Tuesday, where Tuesday morning we booked a room, and we were going to sit in this room with our cell phones and make calls. Now, it wouldn't work everywhere. This is when I was still in London. So we had people splashed across England, Wales, Scotland. I'm not sure if I think Ireland might have been handled by the South Island. But the point is, at the end of the day, is not everybody's going to be there, but people came in. And I pitched it to the manager. So he got people excited about coming in. So we all came into the office when most people were home-based. So we got the certain connection. Number 2, something interesting. I learned a lot from them, and I found out they were picking stuff up from me and us, as the juniors, because we're obviously living and breathing this stuff. This is a bigger part of our job than even theirs, and we look at it from a fresh perspective. So that is a great way to learn and interact. But I think it goes to the main point. You've got to make it valuable, right? We used to have a weekly pipeline meeting, and one day we had 2 managers, and they said, we get the impression most of you are falling asleep during this somehow on a Monday morning. Should we scrap this? We'd go through your pipeline individually, and let's meet every month. You have to clear your schedules for a day or 2. We're all going to meet together. And they really made it a really useful couple of months. We had presentations, because I noticed there was a quarterly thing where all the teams came together. This was in a smaller startup. This is even easier in a way. But I think you can even make it remotely good where people are putting time, but you better make it good. Because I've seen monthly sales with some people, like the younger ones, the less experienced, are getting a lot out of it. Others who really are learning nothing are looking at their watch just thinking, somebody literally said, I could have ranked 16 prospects during this time. I've got deals to make, right? Yeah, literally, I think, I want to redo the ball. I want to redo the pool room, whatever it was, that's what they're thinking. So I think it's really understanding, but getting them engaged too. Listen, sometimes you may have to get them to suffer for a couple of hours, let them be grumpy, whatever. But it's interesting enough. You will keep working on these things. So it may not hit everybody's line. And I think this goes on to something else in sales, is really about the team you have. Now there's obviously people you inherit, which is very difficult. And we spoke last week. If you've got somebody who's amazing, but is not a team player, you may have to just put them somewhere out there. Nobody sees them. Because if you've got a dark cloud, and actually it's usually the crap ones, they're basically moaning half the time, right? Listen, you may also have moaners and groaners actually quite good at what they do. I worked with one person in a smaller cut startup, never saw him smile. During the day, you couldn't speak to him. 5 o'clock, he would happily stop, and instead of going home, would sit down and explain something to you concisely, to the point. I mentioned this, I think, a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
So I think it's that, as well as building a great culture. And I think it's really, we talked about this last week, a bit of diversity. It's very easy to get the same kind of person. That doesn't mean they're all white male men who are Christian, Catholic, whatever. I gave an example last week. Somebody has the same sales team. They're men, women, black, white, brown, gay, straight. Depends on the person. I'm open either way, but it's the same person. And I think there was something when he started mixing. So that's something I think is really important, is building that cohesiveness and building an actual team. Even if you're not there, get people working as a team.
You know the sales teams I love to work on, Yorum? So I agree with you, but I'm going to go at it another way. I love to work on sales teams where we never agreed. I know it sounds weird, okay?
Not at all.
No, very
It sounds weird, but my dear friend Shannon Bailey, if she's listening in, she's going to be sitting there right now. She's going to be jumping up and down, because I used to look over at her and I'd say every once in a while we'd have these team meetings, and she'd start nodding at things I was saying, and I would start nodding at things she was saying. I said, Shannon, we're in trouble. And she'd go, why? I said, we just agreed on something. Let's scrap it.
But
it's a sure sign it's a disaster.
But that's the point of being a good sales team, is when people are discussing, like they have things together. I think we mentioned this about when people share great experiences, poor experiences, like how would you fix this? Let's have a discussion. I'm on committees, and I'm on a few committees, and one of them is there's one person, myself and her, we actually probably speak the most. Always a disagreeing, but she's got great ideas, and often, you know, we sit, we speak, we go backwards, we go forwards. What we come up with is brilliant. In fact, so much so when somebody came in, they said, well, she's saying these things. I said, yeah, because we've already discussed them, but she's thinking, like, how can I make this better? Like, we know that's not going to work. We've already thought of it and modeled it and tried it, but that's the way this person's thinking. I said, that's what I want in the committee. She's constantly thinking, how can I make this better? Right? And you as a salesperson leader has got to be letting these people, I think this is another point, is letting people have their head, but still navigating them, knowing when to tell them in. Yeah. I remember I once went off to, when I was went off to a tender, as we call it. I can't remember what they call it in the US. I ended up in it. I tried to avoid these usually when I was selling tech, and it wasn't taking up much of my time. They wanted me to go down, and I made 3 other meetings in the same city. You know, go down to Bournemouth for the day. There's worse places. But when it didn't work out, and I just knew after the second meeting, we can't do this under the current circumstances. It's just been set up. They're never going to be happy. And my manager said, yeah, I don't even know why he bothered. Yeah. But that I thought was brilliant management. He let me go out there. He thought there may be something here, right? At the end of the day, he's learned the lesson himself. I need to hammer it home. There are better ways for you to use your time, Yorum. This wasn't one of them. You should have walked away earlier. You didn't spend a lot of time. You didn't waste a lot, but think of what you could have done.
Mm-hmm. And do you know what? Like, as always, we're up in time, and we could talk and talk and talk about these subjects all day long. There's so much to talk, and I love the diversity of our thoughts and initials. But going back to your point, Yorum, like there's so much, and you said it, Jason, you said it too, but there's so much for a sales leader to do, right? Getting the time, getting the best out of your team, being an amazing integrator for the business, and then keeping all your customers happy. And I believe the responsibility of the sales team is far beyond any other part of business. So look, guys, I want to thank you all for your time and your input and your observations. Really appreciate it. And we hope to see you again at another Soft and System Site to Sales. And thank you for everyone who has listened and tuned in. Have a great day.
Take care.